So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacturer hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.
Welcome to this week's Energy Show. Now, the OBBB, or One Beautiful Bill, is now law in the United States. And this bill eliminates the 30% tax credit for residential solar and adds restrictions to the 30% tax credit for commercial solar. And it's interesting, commercial solar can also be used for residential leases and power purchase agreements where are considered commercial installations. So effectively, the price for cash and loan purchases of solar is going to go up by 30% at the end of 2026. Solar leasing is still going to be available for a few years, leasing and PPAs, but it's going to be complicated, and we're still not exactly sure what the rules are going to be. And then you have things like domestic content rules, safe harbor considerations, and foreign entity of concern issues that are going to complicate pricing as well as product availability. So there's a lot of uncertainties going on. Every solar contractor is working like crazy to get systems installed by the end of this year, by the end of 2025. And I think 2025 may very well be a record year for solar and battery installations because of this cliff. So smart companies now are working like crazy, but the smart ones are planning for what to do in 2026. And that raises two questions. First, what should solar contractors do to succeed in 2026 and beyond? We want to run sustainable businesses. And the second, what should solar and battery customers consider when evaluating products and installers? So I kind of casting around and looking at the people I know and to really provide this kind of objective advice and experiential advice. And Jeff Wolfe is a good friend going way back. He's a managing partner at Wolf Yates Co, which is a clean tech consultancy based in New York City. But I got to know Jeff during our many years on the SEIA board of directors. And he also has several years of experience at Veloci's Energy, deploying integrated EV charging systems. And kind of going way back, Jeff's been in the solar business even longer than me. He was the founder and CEO of GroSolar, one of the pioneering residential and commercial solar installers, going way back to 1998. So welcome to the show, Jeff. It's good to reconnect with you.
It's great to be here, as always, Barry.
Tell us a little bit about your solar and battery and clean tech career so far, and then we can kind of talk about the future.
Well, it actually goes back way before 1998. I'll disclose a little bit that my first solar collector, I built my first solar collector in 1973. A hot water solar collector in response to the Arab oil embargo. I was a kid. The collector didn't work, but it really spurred my interest in the whole field. And, why should we import energy from a country that didn't like us and caused gas lines? So I've been interested in the field for an awful long time. And, it was in 98 that I founded GroSolar with my wife, and as a lifestyle mom and pop shop company. And then it was in 2001 when Bill McKibben, who was a friend, turned me on to climate change and the impact of climate change. And I decided that our three-person company should solve this issue. And then the World Trade Towers came down, and that, kind of woke me up to the national security implications more of renewable energy. And that's what inspired me to work and build GroSolar into the leading company it became. But then I get tired of things too. So we did that, had a lot of fun. You and I did a lot of amazing work on the SEIA board, passing the ITC several times, creating the jobs report and other things. And then I went into retail energy, took a little tour through Shell, which was really interesting, long enough there to see that they were not going to turn their ship. And then went into battery energy storage coupling for EV charging, which was fascinating time and learned a lot about the battery storage industry, and got that through commercialization. And then, now formed this consulting firm with Mark Yates, who's my long-term COO, and has a tremendous skill set that's really complementary to me. Aside from being just a fun guy to work with. That's where we're at today.
All right. And so a broad, deep background. And so let's dive into the first question. What should solar contractors do now to succeed in 2026 and beyond?
Well, my advice to everybody always is don't worry about things, which doesn't mean that there's not problems. It just means that worrying doesn't do you any good. So take action. And there's a lot of things people got to do. It depends upon how big their company is. It depends upon what geography there is, what utility company they're in. But the industry is going to continue at all levels. It's just going to become different. You and I, Barry, are old enough that we had to sell solar above market rates to people. And you can, in fact, sell solar energy to above market rates to people. It's a hard sell and your volume is way down, but you can, in fact, sell it. But people will buy it. But I think that in a lot of the country, we're still going to be below market rates for a couple of reasons. One is utility rates are going up bananas in much of the country. California is not the only place escalating prices. 13.5% average increase across the country last year for electric costs. You do that for a couple of years and all of a sudden the ITC doesn't matter anymore. So electric prices are going to help out installers. They've got to understand that better. The 30% ITC never provided 30% benefit really to most people. And so I think that prices actually can go up maybe 20 to 25%. So the impact won't be quite so bad. And then we got to figure out ways to cut costs, because that's what you do in a market. And the biggest cost for a long time has been sales acquisition, marketing. I think that companies have got to look into AI for that. One of the things Wolf Yates is doing is we're putting together a social media marketing tool that's based on AI that really automates that and streamlines that. And, it's not that you need to not do it, it's that you need to cut the cost of doing your media, right? And so you can do more media at lower prices, lower price points, so you can make better media and be out there more. And you got to reach the market in different ways. You've done a great job over how long you been on the air, Barry? 15 years doing this?
Yeah, yep, doing it a long time.
And so doing alternative media like that is really important too. Being creative, getting outside of the box. So business has changed. You've got to cut your acquisition costs on the residential side. On the commercial side, I think commercials can continue pretty much as it is, because finally some financing mechanisms are coming in, commercial prices are going up, skyrocketing. So I think commercial, oddly enough, would be the least impacted here. The big utility stuff, not my expertise at this point, and it's certainly going to continue because in some states the big utility stuff makes sense. Big utility stuff will start focusing on data centers who are much less price sensitive. So changing your customer base from being just grid to being load serving is going to be important. Picking and choosing your battles, staying off federal lands, staying off federal right of ways, staying away from anything having to do with federal government is going to be critical. So I think, to sum it up, there's a path forward. And once we stop wringing our hands and crying in our beer, which is, well deserved to do because we worked hard to be here, and then it's all getting blown up kind of punitively, but stop doing that and start focusing on what is possible. And there's a lot there.
You and I have been in the solar business for a long time, but now it's not as much just the solar business, it's the energy business. And a key part of that is batteries. So pretty much everything we're doing right now, 95% or more, is with batteries. And that has a big impact. How do you see decreasing prices for batteries and an increasing demand for reliability and cheap power with batteries? How do you see that affecting things?
So actually, before we get to reliability and all that, batteries also have an interesting play in that the investment tax credit for batteries has not been rescinded. And I'm not clear. Has it been? It's still in place for residential as well, isn't it?
No, everything was rescinded for residential. The 48E tax credit is still in place through, I think, 2033 for batteries, which raises the kind of interesting prospect of using PPAs and leases for batteries, but you can't use it for solar, and then how much does a solar cost in the package?
But what you can do is you can take a PPA, lease the battery, pile everything onto the battery. So the permitting, the interconnection cost, the breakers, all that, the site survey is all on the battery.
Yep.
And then the solar adds $1.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And so the batteries, regardless of their usefulness, which they're very useful, regardless of the usefulness, they'll become useful as a financial tool.
Yeah.
So that's number one. And thanks for bringing it up, because it's a great thing that every solar installer who's not doing batteries, I don't know if there are any left who aren't doing batteries, they should be basically making themselves into battery companies that also do solar. In terms of reliability, one of the reasons that the rates are going up so fast in utility companies is they're investing more in infrastructure because they haven't been doing that for the last 30, 40, 50 years. Infrastructure is expensive. And secondly is that there's more and more weather-related, fire-related costs involved in maintaining their infrastructure. And so that's being put into the rate base. And so all this is to say that the grid is becoming less reliable and less reliable in a big way.
Yeah.
And so I think that, selling reliability is kind of like selling life insurance. And a lot of people buy life insurance. So I think selling reliability, especially as we have more and more electric houses, is going to be a very, very important sell.
Yeah. And, because we're doing that here in California in Silicon Valley, there's a lot of blackouts, a lot of power failures deliberate sometimes, and accidental wind blowing things down. And, the customers are, especially the bigger customers, they're clamoring for batteries. And it's not just one battery. Sometimes they put in 2 or 3 or 4. And you hit the nail on the head. When you talk about a fully electric house that's also heated by electricity, you need more batteries.
Or even in some areas cooled. In some areas like Texas, if your cooling goes out in the summertime, that's also life-threatening.
Yeah, and you lived through that. If I recall, you had a battery that kind of kept
and it
you
wasn't
cool.
life-threatening to me, but my 95-year-old parents, if that Uri had happened in the summertime, would have been life-threatening to them.
What about a wood stove, Jeff? I remember you were an ardent fan of wood stoves and chopping wood for exercise. But
well, that was up in Vermont, and since then, a lot of information has come out about the bad effects of wood stoves. So I'm not just such a fan of wood stoves anymore, and wood stoves don't cool very well.
Yeah, it's funny. I've got a wood stove. It's a nice wood stove. I liked it when we bought this house, and I, had lots of wood, and I stopped. And it's exactly that. Even when you have, a good wood stove, you can still smell the smoke. And, that's turned out to be a very, very bad thing for you. So now the only thing I use the wood for is the pizza oven. And that's a whole different story.
Right. And then also, wood stoves might work okay as an emergency backup when you're home. Mm-hmm. But say you're not home in a freezing winter condition and the power goes out and your pipes freeze when you're not home.
Yep.
So, not a good situation. So yeah, batteries are becoming increasingly important for that reason. And then, Barry, you and I have talked offline about the utilities in California potentially increasing the fixed charges. And as a fixed charges get increased, solar makes less and less economic sense. And so the idea of actually using batteries to take people off grid, actually exit the grid and exercise their freedom of speech, if you will, in energy sources. And that's becoming possible, as you show on your website, it's becoming possible with the electrification of vehicles, which can now hook up to these battery systems and provide a third source of power. You've got the solar, you've got the battery, you've got the grid. The fourth source of power is the truck or the car that's got an outlet on. And so now you've got, rather than having a fossil-fired generator back up your solar battery off-grid house, you've got a electric-fired vehicle which can go down to the corner, go across the street, go 85 miles away, and bring back power to power your house during the 5, 10, 50% of the year when the solar and batteries isn't enough by itself.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could start with a clean sheet of paper to figure out how to arrange our country's electricity and power needs, at least for buildings. And then the first question is, where do we get the cheapest source of power? And the cheapest source of power comes from solar during the day. And therefore, what makes logical sense is everybody should be taking advantage of that. If you buy that power from the utility during the day, it's going to be expensive by the time they deliver it. But if you're generating that power on a school or a government building or covered parking lot or commercial solar, it's really, really cheap. So everybody should be driving their vehicles during the day to work, to school, to wherever, plugging in and charging that vehicle fully during the day, and then driving that battery home and plugging it into your house so you've got that extra power if you need it. Even under really cold conditions, you might only use like 10 or 15 kilowatt hours, 20 kilowatt hours at night on a cold night. And then just next day, you repeat, you charge it again. And if you need to, you can plug it in at a commercial charger. And you can also use...
Even a car with a small battery is a 50 kilowatt battery.
Yeah.
So it's even in Texas, a 50 kilowatt hour battery is a 1.5 day supply.
Yeah. Yeah, and then what's also good is you don't need those ridiculously expensive 200 kilowatt high-speed chargers. Because if everybody's just charging up with a level 2 charger, that's fine to soak up the power during the day.
I might disagree with you somewhat on that. You still need the high-speed chargers for a bunch of other reasons.
Yes, yeah, you need them on the roads.
You don't need them, during the day necessarily in a lot of places, but that's a different debate we'll have. We need a variety. Just like we need a variety of solar, we need a variety of chargers.
I forgot I'm talking to a guy that spent years and years in the commercial charging business at Veloce. But my point is that you don't need to install at companies and at schools expensive level 3 chargers. Every space should have a cheap level 2 charger. That's all you need.
That's correct. And maybe you put one level 3 in for the people or person who forgot to plug it in or has a charge problem or whatever.
Or the CEO.
You're right. The vast majority of stuff at workplace and at school should be level 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can be a pretty poor level 2 as well.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, you look at the electricity prices in California many times during the day, during the year. Electricity is negative. They're turning off the output from wind and solar because there's no place for that energy to go.
And after Winter Storm Uri in Texas, many of the fossil pundits come out and say, well, we can't, put the whole grid on batteries. And I actually did a back of the envelope calculation. And I said, okay, if you took all the cars and passenger trucks in Texas, and you made them all electric, how much power could you put into those batteries? And at that point in time, you could run the Texas grid at 100% capacity for 24 hours and put 100% of it into cars.
Mm-hmm.
Which means because of fluctuations in power need, the cars could then power the state of Texas for 2 days.
Yeah. Some of that math is amazing. And that's why if you started with a clean sheet of paper, you start using these vehicle batteries, and they're just absolutely becoming cheaper and cheaper and ubiquitous. All right, let's shift gears a little bit because you just have so much business experience running solar companies and consulting. What are some of the principles that solar installers and contractors should think about? Because many of them don't have a business background.
Yeah, so that's a pretty broad question. First of all, solar is just a business. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so business fundamentals, understanding, keeping your books up to date, understanding what things cost, knowing not, okay, I made money on the job, but where did you make money on the job? Understanding the unit costs, understand what a unit cost is, understand the unit costs of your projects, keeping track of your projects, each residential project, keeping track of it, so you know where you're making money, where you're losing money. Because if you don't know where you're making money, you can't make more. If you don't know where you're losing money, you can't make money. So really understanding where the money goes in marketing, in labor, in materials, and then focusing on the big items. Every solar contractor I knew always focused on buying the panels for the cheapest price they could. And they'd save 2 pennies on the panels per watt. And then they'd mess up the installation and send the crew back for a second day, which costs them way more money than the 2 pennies. So pay attention to the big pieces and then gradually work your way down to the list. That's probably the most important thing. The second is to be creative in your marketing, because marketing is the biggest expense for most solar companies. Be creative in that. Do something different. I had a friend long ago who did placemats in diners.
Oh.
And one day she was sitting at that diner with her branded hat on in front of the placemat with her brand on it. And somebody came over to her to talk to her about it.
Well, you're in New Jersey now, the capital of roadside diners.
Well, there you go. Anyway, it's a question of being creative, right? Finding a way to do something and then trying things, tracking where you get the leads from, and then doing something different that doesn't work. GroSolar did a whole bunch of billboards for a while. And we found they didn't work, really. But, we tracked it, we did it, it was fun, and we moved on.
Yeah.
And then the third piece of advice is take care of yourself. Running a business of any kind is a marathon, not a sprint. And too often I see solar owners who, put all themselves into it, and you need to step back. It took me 15 years to learn this, but step back a little bit, take time for yourself, both your mental health and your physical health. Because when you do that, when you are working, you're better. And you actually make up for the time that you took off to take care of yourself.
What about things like diversifying into related fields?
Yeah. So, there should be no such thing as a solar contractor anymore. Everybody should minimally be solar and batteries. As we electrify homes, it's oddly hard still in many areas to find a good heat pump contractor, because HVAC contractors do what they did last year and the year before and the year before and the year before, and they sell gas furnaces and oil furnaces, and that's what they do. And so getting them to do something new is really hard, which creates an opportunity for somebody who will do something new. One of the best ways to make more money is to sell a higher ticket to every customer you sell to. And so if you can add the batteries to the solar, that helps decrease your sales cost or marketing cost. If you can add heat pumps to the solar, and it's not trivial to add heat pumps. Maybe you can do an alliance with somebody, you make the sales, they do the installations, you don't get as much money, but you're making something more than you were. And, basically become a lead generator for another company. So there's ways to do it, but diversifying out of being pure solar to being more of a home electrification company. Get the right license so you can do the panel upgrades. Most solar companies do that. Look at providing smart panels and justify why you're providing a smart panel. Because as you electrify a home, having a smart panel actually can make sense and actually can provide not a financial payback, a reliability payback.
All right, let's talk a little bit about financing. How do you see solar financing evolving? The tax credit is gone. That's a residential credit. That was cash off your taxes. But there's a lot of companies that are offering leases and PPAs. What's going to be the future of that?
So let's not talk about leases and PPAs first. Let's talk about just a direct loan. There's been some folks who have been, I think, egregiously taking advantage of loan products where they have these interesting loans with bought down interest rates and balloon payments for the tax credit and something to make them complex. And they get pretty egregious fees on them, which jacks up the price of solar. I think those go away because all of a sudden it's like, okay, I need a $30,000 loan to pay off my solar over a X year period. And there's no ITC, there's no balloon, there's no, and so that's easy for me to shop for a comparable product. You come into my home, you offer me something, I can shop for a comparable product, trivial.
Yep.
So I think that the fancy inflated bought down rate solar provider loans go away.
Yeah, those huge 50% or $20,000 dealer fees just to get that can't afford that anymore.
No, I can't afford it, and that's a good thing. That's been a stain on solar, I think, frankly. So partnering, if you want to provide financing, partnering with credit unions is always a good way to go. Helping people do their own, financing through banks and such is a good way to go. I think that those egregious loans are gone. In PPAs and such, I think they're going to continue at least through the end of the ITC for commercial, right? And I don't know if they'll become any better or less expensive now than they were, because there's no reason for them to, right? I know Sunrun is basically shifting to becoming a battery company. And I think that's probably what they have to do. That's what I would be doing if I was Mary Powell. But I think the standard PPA model probably continues on through 2027. What happens after that? I don't know why a PPA continues. I think that I think what will happen is you'll have no PPAs, but you'll have long-term service agreements. Because, when we first started selling SolarBerry, we always told people, no maintenance required, right? And that just turned out to not be true.
It's certainly not true with batteries.
It's not true with solar either.
Yeah.
The number of solar panels I've had replaced on my roof from third-party vendors who, because the panels didn't last, from major manufacturers. So I think that you will see an increase in 10-year O&M agreements being put into the purchase price or being put into a loan or being contracted separately or somehow being put in. So maybe there's a successor to the PPA that puts together a good loan, reasonable loan, and a service contract into an affordable monthly payment. It's easy.
All right. What's the good news? What can we look forward to? How is this going to improve, and how are we going to get out from the fact that there's no more tax credit?
Well, I think all of what we've talked about are how the industry is going to change. I think that the thing which you can celebrate is we're actually going to survive without a tax credit. That's amazing. Back when I started solar, we were doing systems for $20 a watt installed cash up front. So we've come a long way since then. And the fact that we can put twice as many watts on a roof as we could back then, probably 3 times as many watts. It's just staggering, right? So you can actually put enough solar on a roof to do an electrified house and a lot of houses, and that ups your ticket price and makes it higher. Ticket prices are always a good thing for businesses. So I think we can celebrate that we're here. We're just going to celebrate that we have an ongoing opportunity, and can celebrate. Well, I hate to say we can celebrate increasing electric prices, but we can celebrate the increased economic viability of our service offerings, continue to. And I think that we can celebrate beating our adversaries. The biggest and the worst are coming after us to try and kill the industry, and they're not going to succeed.
Yeah, it changed the world. It changed the way utilities operate and make fossil fuels so non-economic that they're really not going to make sense anymore.
I mean, the reason that this is all happening is because they're scared out of their boots that in fact is happening. And tipping points don't happen gradually. Tipping points happen all of a sudden. And I think that, 2026 is probably going to be a difficult year, not a death year, but a difficult year. I think 2027 and certainly 2028 are going to see the industry bigger than it's been.
Yeah,
And
my
once
sentiments exactly.
we're bigger than we were in 2025, without the tax credit, now it's unstoppable. Now it is absolutely totally unstoppable.
And it's unstoppable throughout the world.
By the way, the rest of the world's still going on and doing this. The rest of the world's doing this energy transition anyway. The energy transition globally is not stopping. It's accelerating. It's just a question whether the U.S. is going to lag or lead, produce or buy. And right now we're on the pathway to lag and buy, which is horrible for our overall economy. Forget about the solar industry, our overall economy. But we're gonna come through this and transform the electric markets in the country.
Yeah, we definitely will. All right, we're almost at the end. We talked about how you got into solar. What do you do for fun? What's your recreation?
What do I do for fun? So I'm taking care of myself, so I do some workout stuff now, a little bit of running and a bunch of workout stuff. We've got this cabin up in Northwest Jersey I go to a lot, and when you have a rural rustic cabin and you go there, you spend a little bit of time swimming and enjoying the place, and then you spend some time fixing it up. So doing some handyman work there. Then new to me this year is I actually have a garden. I built 2 raised bed gardens, small things, and I have 3 tomato plants, 3 cucumber plants, and some pepper plants, and I can pronounce that my tomato harvest is phenomenal already.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, it sounds similar to me. Now, the other thing that you may not have learned about yet is you are in a really, really good hiking area.
Yeah.
The Washington Trails, it's just Morristown, New Jersey was where George Washington basically was headquartering his troops in the Revolutionary War. So lots and lots of good hiking trails around there.
Yeah, and we live a quarter mile from the Patriot Path, which I go running down. Yeah, no, it's a fabulous area to be.
All right, terrific. All right, well, how can people get in touch with you?
Easiest is jeff@wolfyates.com. Is the easiest way to do it. I'm on LinkedIn. A lot of people are connected to me. Reach out, connect some more. I'm spending a lot of time now working on, oddly enough, AI and working to make some tools there that can help clean tech companies take advantage of AI and not get taken advantage of. We've got a cool AI SWOT tool to take your business characteristics and figure out how is AI going to impact you negatively potentially, and how can it impact you positively, and actually give you actionable advice on it. So we're working on that. We've got some AI-based marketing tools. We're really working to create an AI suite that is easy for small business operators who need a mile wide, but only a foot deep.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have on this week's Energy Show. Great discussions, Jeff. Thanks for joining me, and thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. And if you missed any of today's show, you can always go to our website at www.energyshow.biz and listen to the podcasts.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's Energy Show.